Welcome everyone. Welcome at Balie. We call this evening Conversations for the Poly-Curious. So I'm happy to see so much poly-curious people here in the audience. My name is Rogaia. I'm program editor here at Balie and also the host this evening. And I just thought about to have like 3 questions for the audience, because I'm wondering who is in the audience when it comes to polyamory. But you're allowed to lie, or they're also, it's been streamed. So the first category is monogamous, just here with my friend. Monogamous. And the second, just testing the waters of non-monogamy. Testing the waters, just curious, poly-curious. And are there also people who have years of experiences on the poly planet? Okay. Well, I hope we built in some time, plenty of time, also for questions from the audience. So then, yeah, it's okay to do like the more advanced questions. The reason we're here today is the book Je mag me alles vragen. It's written by the wonderful Deepa Paul. And it's published this week in both Dutch and English. And the English title is Ask Me How It Works. And it's about love in an open marriage. I learned a lot this week reading the book about polyamory, about sexual desires, but most of all about communication. So there's a lot to unpack today. We'll begin just the 2 of us, me and Deepa, and then I'll invite Manoy Kamps and Eva de Groei. And at the end, there is plenty of time for questions for you guys. So let's start by introducing you. Deepa Paul. She's born in Manila and is living in Amsterdam. Her journalistic writing has appeared in magazines such as the Philippine Star and Singapore Women's Weekly. And she's written personal essays for Cheeks and Call Them. And Ask Me How It Works is her debut book. A warm welcome.
Hi, Rogaia.
So how are you? I think it must have been an excited week this week.
It's been a big week. I'm super excited to be here. It's a dream come true. I took the tram here, and with the sunshine like coming through, the trees, I had a little moment, of all my dreams coming true. So thank you for having me here. It's been great working on the program with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the book, and thank you also for being here. Well, let's dive into your love life.
I mean, why are we here?
Yeah. So, what is actually your origin story of your non-monogamous life?
Well,
where did it all begin?
Where did it all begin? As I read in the book, it began in the Philippines, where I was born. So growing up in the Philippines, it's a very conservative Catholic country. Fun fact, it's the only 2 countries in the world where divorce is illegal are the Philippines and Vatican City. So growing up, I never, monogamy was definitely the only way to go. And beliefs around sex and relationships and marriage and love and intimacy were just shaped by all of that. And somehow, I always knew I was different in the way that I wanted to experience love and in the beliefs I had about what it meant to be in a committed relationship together. And then I moved to Amsterdam. And that's kind of where... But first...
You got married, right?
Oh, yeah, first I got married. My husband and I are both from the Philippines, and we both came here 13 years ago. And Amsterdam was a huge eye-opener for me in terms of the diversity of the kinds of relationship styles, but also in the different ways you could explore your sexuality and experience, pleasure, and that got me very curious. So I guess that's where it all began, and that's where kind of the action kicks off in the book. Yeah.
So we're not going to leave the rest in the book, right?
No, we're not. We're going to unpack most of it tonight, I think. I'd always wanted to explore a lot of things around, sexuality, and like I said, I'm really, really curious. So I started out with this American site. I don't know how many Americans are in this.
I never heard of the site.
Yeah, when I talk to people, hear about it, it's like, what's that? It's called Craigslist. Okay, we have some chuckling Americans in the crowd. Craigslist was like a personal site. So you could advertise like jobs or kind of like, maybe like Marktplaats. Was it like Marktplaats? Yeah, like Marktplaats in like the 2000s. So you could advertise anything from, selling furniture, or if you were looking for a dog sitter or whatever. But there was a section in Craigslist called, the Craigslist Personals, and people here would post everything they were looking for, and I mean everything. So I started out like reading what other people were interested in, and just like 90% of it I didn't know. So so it came to the point where I wanted to learn more and more about what people desire, like what are all these things. And in the beginning, when we first moved to Amsterdam, I brought some of this up with my husband, and since we both come from a really conservative culture, his response to it wasn't very welcoming, just to put it gently. And I had what I call my underground years, where I continued to explore what I was curious about, but eventually, doing it on my own was not the way to go, and was not how I wanted to be. And that's kind of the entry point to what brought us here. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if you also want to tell me about, because I think that's a really important part of the story, that, there was like something happened in the underground.
Yeah.
You can read that in the book, or maybe you can tell it later on.
Yeah.
And then there was like a explosion, you can, so to say, in your marriage. And your husband eventually said, I'm going to stay. And you had relationship therapy. What was it called again?
It was called, so at some point, my husband and I came to like a make or break kind of situation. And we had nonviolent communication. So it's not a mode of therapy, but it's a way of communicating to each other where you learn how to listen to each other with more empathy, to express your desires and needs in a way that's more easily heard by the other. And we worked on that for a while. And that was how, I guess, we both...
But how was it for you that you heard that your needs were valid, so to say?
I grew up under the impression that having needs related to sexuality and the body were bad. In the Catholic upbringing, sex was bad, it was a sin, and if you wanted it, you were also a bad person. So at the time, I'd also just become a mother, and all these needs of serving the family, fulfilling my duty as a wife and a mother were kind of more noble in a sense, and I learned to hide or disconnect or shut down the needs that I thought were, not valid or bad or worse or made me a bad person. And so in nonviolent communications coaching, it was absolutely radical to me that our coach said, both of your needs are valid. In your needs to explore your sexuality, for adventure, for all these things, they're not bad. And it was the first time I'd ever heard this. And it was, for me, it was just absolutely radical. It made me see myself in a different way, that I didn't have to live with self-hatred and loathing, and it wasn't something to be fixed. That there was a way for us to explore, there was a way for me to explore while also considering the needs of my husband. And that's kind of the process we embarked on together.
Nice. And about the book, because it's such a wonderful but also really personal story. Did you ever hesitate to write this story, to put it in the open?
Well, it took a really long time. I was on the radio show yesterday with Shari, and I was trying to figure out what animal has the longest pregnancy, like gestation period. I don't know if it's a whale or an elephant or something, like 4 years. I don't know. It took a long time to get
What's
used.
the answer?
I don't know. Any animal doctors in the house? I don't know. Any animal aficionados? You can come to me after and tell me. But there was a really long process just to first getting used to the idea of writing something short about exploring sexuality in an open marriage. Maybe it's nice to tell you that Ask Me How It Works started out as an essay. And it started out as an attempt to answer all the questions I received from men on dating apps. I thought if I could just forward them a link, it would make my life easier. And we could just get all of that, over with. And the essay was, back then it was called Ask Me How It Works, Frequently Asked Questions About My Open Marriage, like an FAQ. And it just grew longer and longer and longer. I tried to get it published, but about 7 years ago, no one wanted to read about open relationships. How things have changed. And during COVID, I worked with an amazing writing coach and mentor who's here today, Nina Seagal, to develop Ask Me How It Works, and just, I wanted to finish it. And she told me, this is not an essay. Why are you trying to shoehorn all your experiences into like a 1,200 word essay? This is not an essay, this is a book. And then I had this kind of, like epiphany, and I came home and I wrote the outline that same day. So it's been 5 years since I started writing the book. And it's been one little step at a time. There was never any grand vision of someday I will be in the Balie with a book in English and in Dutch. It was just, I want to finish the essay. Then I want to finish the first chapter. Then I want to finish the second chapter. And somehow with all those steps, we got here.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you. So I want to invite Eva de Groei and Manoy Kams. A warm welcome also for you. Eva de Groei works as a sexual health expert. She organizes support groups for non-monogamous people and is a researcher at AVA, the Dutch advocacy organization for contraception and abortion. And on Instagram, she occasionally shares her insights under the name @EvaPerel. And Manoy Kams is a queer conductor, theater maker, and writer. They work internationally from New York to Tokyo. Manoy's artistic work is deeply intertwined with activism, addressing themes such as gender, sexuality, the climate crisis, racism, and HIV/AIDS. Welcome. So also that's kind of Esther Perel question for you. How did it begin? Where did it begin, your polyamorous life, love life? Eva.
I think I started exploring like the unwritten rules very early on. I think like at the beginning after high school, where I found out that, when I have a relationship, I had a boyfriend at the time, and we decided like, okay, we have a relationship, and then we didn't discuss any like agreements or anything on about that. But I knew that like if you have a relationship, then you don't like French kiss or tongzoenen. So what I started
with other people or
with other people. Sorry, yeah, with other people. And so what I started to do on the dance floor, I remember, is like I started exploring different kinds of intimacy. So I started licking ears. I started like dancing very erotically with people, and I was like, "This is not vreemdgaan. This is not cheating. This is okay." And I found that very strange. So I think that was an exploratory process for me, where I was like, "Okay, this is called cheating, and this is not." So that was the start for me. Yeah.
Manoy?
Sorry. So like Deepa, I also grew up in a quite conservative environment. So I was raised in Sri Lanka by Dutch parents, long story. And my school was British, and it had this kind of 1950s vibe around it. So it was very like rigid, very gendered. We had to wear school uniforms. It was officially secular, but very like Christian, Protestant in the way we were kind of morally educated. So that's where it started. But somehow when we moved to the Netherlands when I was 14, quite soon I encountered an interview with a Dutch writer called Arthur Japin. I'm sure many people know him. And he at the time was already living with 2 partners in the same house. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense to me. So for some reason, it didn't clash with my worldview at the time. And then I got my first boyfriend when I was 17, and we immediately started living together when I moved out of the house. And we did monogamy, I think, for like 1.5 years, because that was like the thing you did. So like the mononormative thing was happening to us as well. And I immediately started nagging him about like, I actually would like to be open. And we were open for a while, and then we, separated for other reasons. But yeah, it kind of evolved from there.
And you also told me that you were like researching, actually, reading a lot of books. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think I came at non-monogamy and polyamory from more of like a theoretical framework in a way, because like I said, I encountered it first in theory in someone else's life through this interview with Arthur Japin, and it kind of always stayed with me. So I also identify as queer, as non-binary by now. I didn't know the word then. So I was online a lot. And I think in that kind of space of queerness, I also ran into other forms of doing relationships than what was normal in society, or considered the norm, I should say. So running into theories about other ways of doing your love life was kind of, by extension, very inevitable, I would say. So I found forums about polyamory. I found books about polyamory, a famous one being More Than Two, by an American couple called Franklin Vo and Eve Rickert. But there's a lot out there. And I think when my first boyfriend and I separated, I was officially single for a while. I do a lot of air quotes. Every word is a construct. So yeah, I considered myself single for a while, but I was already calling myself poly. So I guess I was poly and single. And then I guess I started attracting people who sort of identified with that on some level.
Nice. And do you recognize that, doing the research and reading books?
It's really interesting to me to hear both of your stories, because I was like, oh, this is how normal people found it. Because you were
normal people.
Yeah, because I was, I guess in my 30s, and I was already married with a child, and the research for me was reading about other people's fantasies and other people's lives, and I honestly thought when we first started out, I honestly thought we invented this. I didn't know that there was a name for it. And we were like, wow, this is, and then at some point you're like, oh, there's a name for it. Yeah, so I don't think I did as much research as I should have done in the beginning.
Yeah, I think for me it was more of a desire, so it came more from inside than from my head. I think it came.
You did research on the dance floor.
Exactly, that's what I did. And I was already doing feminism back then, and then I did start reading Ethical Slut, the book, and I remember like crying because I felt so seen, and yeah, like reading your book actually. I recommend.
And in these books, are there also different philosophies and different theories, or is there a difference?
I think like the books you mentioned, Ethical Slut and More Than Two, they tend to be like, a lot of books on polyamory tend to be from an expert perspective, people who have done a lot of research, who have background in psychology, and there's not a lot of stories of lived experience, let's say. And then I think we were talking about this on Monday, all of the memoirs that I found when I was reading, researching for my book, all of the open relationship memoirs were inevitably written by like a white American woman from Brooklyn, and it's like the only category, that there is. So, yeah, and I remember going up recently to, I met someone in a publishing event, and I started talking about my book, and they're like, well, what's your background? And I'm like, I'm Filipina. And they were like, no, I mean, do you have a background in psychology? And I was like, no. And they were like, are you an expert? And I was like, no, I'm a mess. But messes can write books too, and and we live lives. So yeah.
Let's go to the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before I read the first excerpt for the evening, I wanted to tell you that Je mag me alles vragen, or Ask Me How It Works, is about the story of my non-monogamy, but each chapter in the book centers around one of the questions that I most often ask when I tell people I'm in an open marriage. And it answers those questions, but it also tells the story. This is from chapter 12, What Happens If You Fall in Love? Aren't you afraid of falling in love? People who ask me this question tend to be skeptics. They tend to have a pretty set idea of how love and relationships ought to work. They often want to be proven right and believe they eventually will be. You think it's all fun and games now, they say, wagging the proverbial finger at my salacious escapades, my open marriage. Wait till you fall in love, then it'll be a disaster. Then maybe you'll come to your senses and stop risking a perfectly good thing for all this nonsense. You'll see. What is so disastrous about falling in love? Falling in love and the whole concept of romantic love is loaded with meaning. Depending on the culture we are born into and where we are in life, falling in love triggers a sequence of behaviors and actions that society expects us to take after what is essentially a chemical reaction between two people. For example, falling in love in your teens carries a different set of expectations than doing so in your 20s. For someone in my position, happily married with a young child, falling in love spells disaster. This is textbook midlife crisis. Falling in love with someone new will make me want to leave my husband, wrecking my family in the process. The underlying assumption is that ultimately I will have to choose. But what if I don't have to? The morning after my talk with Robert, my first thought upon waking was, fuck, did I break the bubble? When I recounted my spacey ramblings to Emma, my best friend, she laughed like a benevolent mother superior counseling a confuzzled Fräulein Maria after her ballroom whirl with Captain Von Trapp. Oh, Deepa, 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 she said. If we'd had been speaking in person, I'm positive she would have patted my head or both. You can't love someone just a little bit. Emotional safety was a key feature of the bubble. It was what allowed Robert and I to fully let go and enjoy each other as much as we did. Those boundaries had been stretched through my own doing to the edge of unexplored territory. A sense of safety had to be restored if these nights were to continue. I would have to be more responsible with my words, more firm with my boundaries, possibly withdraw for a while until stability had been reestablished. What I didn't realize then was that I had moved the goalposts for the relationship and for Robert without even knowing it. For a moment, I felt embarrassed, almost vulnerable, but I dusted myself off. It was all going to be fine. I hadn't fallen in love with Robert yet. I was still the breezy, sexy woman who sailed in and out of men's lives and bedrooms on her own wave of energy and magnetism. as he'd put it himself, with her own gravity and atmosphere. Wasn't I?
So were the parts that you recognized, Manoy?
Yes, I think the interesting question that always comes up in conversations about poly and with people who are kind of curious about it is like, indeed, what do you do in such and such a situation? And it's often this kind of assumption that you always depart from monogamy and then move into something else. But there are, of course, many ways of coming at it. So I didn't really come from monogamy because I was kind of poly and then I started doing it in a way. But there's still kind of, and that kind of almost leads automatically into the idea of hierarchy, that the monogamous couple that you start from always needs to be protected somehow. And that's always like the safe haven that you can return to. Whereas I always believe that once you've kind of started on the journey of kind of changing your relationship paradigm, you can't really go back. I mean, you could, but then everything has changed so much that the old world is like, well and truly gone in a way. But it's a story that I hear a lot, actually. So it's very common. I think that I think it's very relatable for a lot of people.
And for you, Eva, is it relatable?
I think it made me think about falling in love, and that's every time I'm in love with a person and I have very good sex with that person, because that's the best, having sex when you're in love. I always think for like a week, maybe a month, maybe 2 months, that I want to have kids with this person. And I just found out that that's a thing, and then it goes away again. So I think it made me
Is there a name for it?
The new relationship
Your
energy.
relationship energy with baby fever.
Exactly. With baby fever.
With baby fever.
I didn't, that's new for me. I love it. That's me.
Because maybe it's also good to know if you are coming from a kind of hierarchical. What is your relationship structure, actually, is the question.
So I didn't say that in the beginning. I was thinking I should have ended with what is my situation now. But right now I have a nesting partner, and I got a baby 5 months ago with him, and we live together. And before I had multiple partners, so I would say I'm like a polyamorist, but it changes. It's like it's a fluid thing, I think. And I do really enjoy living together now, and maybe that will change, but we will see. Now we have a kid, so it's kind of practical as well. That's my situation right now.
And also to, maybe stick to the question of that chapter, are you afraid to fall in love?
Not anymore, no. I think the first time I fell in love, it was really, how do you say it, like tectonic plates moving underneath you.
An earthquake?
It was like an earthquake. Also because we had like open relationship agreements, my partner and me, and then I wanted to explore more and actually have like a full relationship with that person and not only like have adventures. So it was very hard. And now I just know myself a bit better in these situations and how to deal with it.
Yeah. And how do you cope with that situation?
Well, what happened? Oh, sorry, I have a question.
Go ahead.
May I ask, like, what relationship agreements you had in the beginning, and how do you negotiate changing them when you fall in love, and like you're in that new relationship energy?
I know, it was terrible. It was terrible because I think it felt very, for Simon, my partner, it felt very hard and very scary because I was so in love and I wanted to have kids with this other person as well. Yeah. And we had like, oh, you can go on a couple of dates. That was kind of like an exchange numbers and go on a couple of dates kind of agreement. And then it changed into, I want to meet parents. I would like you to meet each other. So they met each other and they went They went to each other's birthdays. We had a kind of like a V-shaped relationship for a while. It was really hard, so we had to go through things. Oh, we also broke up for 2 months in that period. It was COVID. It was intense. It was everything.
And also, are there things that you could have done differently, or is it something that you just have to go through? For the people who are in the audience and maybe are opening up their relationship and are afraid to fall in love.
I think a lot is going through it, and if I look back at myself, I think I can be quite uit de bochten vliegen. So I can be a little bit like like that.
This is the best translation. I'm learning so much.
And maybe I could have. I think this feeling of hurry, like I'm in love and I should like do now, and I should see this person now, like to build in a little bit of pause. That would be helpful for me, for my type of personality, I think. Yeah.
What about for you, Manoy? Like
I was
reflecting on your past
I'm just
behavior.
reflecting on my past sins. So I have a tendency to basically question everything. I think I did that from like the youngest possible age. I think this is one of the first memories my parents would tell you if you were asking them like, what were you like as a child? So for me, at a young age, again, being queer and not being sure about my gender, I think friendship and romance never felt like two very separate things. I never really knew the difference, also because the object of my affection was also someone that I wanted to be friends with, I guess, and what was really the difference. So that's one thing that happened already from a really young age. And I think later in life, when people around me were starting to get like traditional relationships, starting to have like boyfriend, girlfriend, first kiss, all of those like milestones, I was not having any of that. And for me, it came a bit later, those first steps. But I think by that time, I didn't really genuinely didn't understand what people meant when they say romantic, for instance, or when they say I'm in love, because for me it kind of, and the same way we talk about jealousy as being actually like a kind of conglomerate of multiple underlying affections and emotions and maybe thought processes. With romance, I thought, but usually when people say it's a romantic relationship, not just friends, I think, that means you're having sex. That's usually what people mean. And then when it's like, I'm in love with this person, I want to be with them all the time. That sounds awfully like an obsession to me, So I try to like deconstruct all of these things because they didn't make sense to me in the like normal sense of how society views them. But I was like, okay, so there's sex and there's like wanting to spend time with someone, and there's like wanting to have a child with someone, and wanting to have a cat with someone, and wanting to make art with someone. So I kind of tumbled into what I now know to be a form of relationship anarchy, where all of these things are kind of on the table, and you just kind of decide together which of the little tapas on the table you want to eat together.
Relationship tapas.
Relationship
Love
tapas,
it.
a relationship buffet. Yeah. So I mean, I do recognize a lot of the things you say, but at the same time, I'm like, I rarely find myself saying I'm in love, actually, because I feel like, I have a crush, or I'm kind of obsessed with someone, and then that lasts a week, and then the obsession is over, and I'm aware of all the hormones that are involved, as you mentioned, the chemical reaction. So, I kind of lost track of the societal construct again, I guess, and try to stay very true to how it feels for me.
Yeah, Eva?
Yeah, I'm curious because we had so I organize community groups for non-monogamous people, and we also had a theme on relationship anarchy. And I wonder, how do you deal with, because of course it's the relationship anarchy idea, I love it. Like the buffet, you can choose, it feels very logical with friends, it's already very logical with this friend, I do sports with this friend. But how do you deal, because I had difficulty with that, how do you deal with like the ideas from the outside that are also internalized in people, such as the festivities, like with who do you do the holidays, for example, like these things do have a hierarchy. So how do you manage?
I mean, I'm also looking at you because they also have a hierarchy if you're in an environment where it is valued in a certain way, right? Like, so there are cultures where Christmas isn't a thing, There are cultures where Sinterklaas doesn't. I mean, I never celebrate Sinterklaas, but I mean, I'm sort of joking. But I think all of the things on the table are on the table to be discussed. And if it's important to you that a partner is with you in an important moment, then that's a request you can make in my book. And I try to operate not from assumption, but from like clarifying, from being explicit, from, and of course, after a while, if you've been with someone for a while, then you get into a certain routine. But at the same time, time is limited. You know, there are a lot of like poly cliches. One of them is like, what do you do for Christmas? And the other is like, how do you like manage your time? So we always say love is infinite and time is not. And well, yeah, so there's only one Boxing Day. There's only one first day of Christmas. So of course you have to kind of be, yeah, clever with those things.
And
so
for you,
it's not always the same every year, I guess.
Is it important to consciously name and discuss these things with different love partners?
For sure, yeah.
I agree.
One thing I always say, like as a joke, but I think I've actually come to believe it over the years, is that time is a construct. Like, we know, you know, that today is, sorry, what day is it? It's Friday. But well, you know, somewhere else it's Saturday. And we can say that my birthday is on Tuesday, but I can also say my birthday is on Friday. And I can have 2 birthdays. You know, like time is the meaning we give to like the words and the numbers and the values we assign to something. So I think I've come to believe this because I've missed my birthday so many times because I was sick. And we'll just, you know, we'll do it on Saturday. Well, I'm doing birthday with you and I'm doing a birthday with you. And that's how we're going to do it. Yeah. So it's, it feels maybe a bit chaotic, but it's the meaning we give to the holidays and, you know, certain swatches of time. And everything can be discussed in a conversation, I think. Like, what happens if something really important comes up and your partner misses your birthday? Like, are you, you know, and then you can just say, hey, that's fine.
How important?
We'll do it, you know, we'll do it tomorrow. Or we'll do it when you're better. Or, yeah, and everything can be discussed. Everything is a result of a conversation, I think.
Maybe we should go to the second reading.
Why not? Chapter 7, Are You Ever Jealous? In the aftermath of the affair, the nights when Marcus and I cuddled on the couch and giggled over Tinder profiles together brought affection and buoyancy back into our marriage. Laughter was our medicine, a sense of shared discovery our soothing balm. Feeling like 2 crazy kids with a naughty secret, Marcus and I goggled at the sheer variety and mind-boggling specificity of the kinks we stumbled upon on FetLife, one of the largest kink-oriented online communities in the world. We rolled our eyes at the early 90s aesthetic and clunky user interface of Swingers Date Club, where we posted a profile as a couple and scrolled through invitations to swinger clubs and couples-only sex parties. Those moments felt like the promise of adventure, the first ticklish sip of bubbles before a wild night out on the town. Reality set in when I began racking up dates and Marcus began striking out. Before long, I was the only one with any dubious Tinder matches to show or cringe-worthy opening lines to chuckle at. The fantasy of fetish parties and swingers nights fizzled into the ether when we realized that they all started too late for us, the parents of a 3-year-old, to attend. Living half a world away from family meant that we couldn't drop our child off at the grandparents for a night off or a weekend away, a luxury the Dutch parents we knew took for granted. As kinky and involved as it was, my little experiment with Theo was the least of Marcus's concerns. It was easy for him to roll his eyes and brush off the sight of me posing for selfies in Theo's billowy blue dress. Feminization was nothing he'd ever been curious about or wanted to experience for himself. "No thanks," he quipped, shaking his head. "Knock yourself out." But when my dating life took off without him, he struggled. "This was supposed to be fun for both of us," he complained. Tension would fill the house as I dressed up for dates, as though Marcus was stealing himself. I would head out after bedtime, leaving him home alone to discover what new motherhood had taught me, that it was entirely possible to be lonely in a marriage. Loneliness had been my constant companion in the wakeful nights I spent breastfeeding while Marcus slept. During the sleepless hours I spent in the dark with the teething baby while he jetted off on business trips to London and New York, watching Broadway shows after his meetings and workshops, whining and dining on the company dime. Throughout the months I spent at home in the mind-deadening cycle of playtime, feeds, and naps, while he enjoyed an uninterrupted career trajectory. Every time I was called to pick up our daughter early from daycare when she felt clingy or ill, expected to surrender whatever freelance gig I had lined up, to lie down beside her and stare at the ceiling as she burned with fever. Now Marcus chafed at loneliness as it intertwined with envy, a combination that had become familiar to me over the years. In retaliation, he took to Tinder with a grim obstinacy. A type A overachiever and inherently competitive, he became bent on racking up his own score to bolster his ego. Was I having fun? He would outfun me. Did I have multiple dates lined up? He would line up more. Was I having a wild and exciting time? He would revel in so much wildness and excitement I wouldn't be able to stand it. I would regret having asked for this and renege on the whole experiment, groveling at his feet. His determination was a neon sign over his head, flashing in red. "I'll show you. Just you wait."
Well, about the competition. Is it something you recognize, Eva?
Yes, I do. I think it's something that is discussed in the community groups very often, especially when people start with non-monogamy. Then it can be really this competitive element. I remember, yeah. And I think what I also
What did you remember?
Yeah. I was thinking about an anecdote, and then I was like, oh, maybe this is not a relevant anecdote. But it was on how to unpack. Basically, it was about how to unpack jealousy, and that you can have, like, an insecurity can be maybe you can, like, oh, I'm jealous. For example, I had a boyfriend and he was dating someone and she was very thin. And back then I had a lot of body issues. So it was hurting me so much, but it was more about me, my insecurity, that it kind of like confronted me with. Whereas sometimes this jealousy can mean, if you unpack it, you find out, hey, maybe I have an unmet need in my relationship. For example, very simple example in the community group then, she said like, hey, we started dating, we started opening our relationship, and now my boyfriend goes out to a fancy dinner with someone else. But we never go out fancy dinners, and this is something that I want. So it's about the unpacking, and I think, yeah, the competitive element can be part of that. It's the insecurity thing, yeah.
Deepa?
I actually had a question for Manoy. What if, like, two of your partners want to have the cat with you? You know what I mean? Like, if there's the tapas, right? If two people want the same tapas, but there's only one of those tapas, what happens? Has that happened to you? And, like, can you think of an example where it's happened to you, and how did you manage it? Because that, for me, that's also like a form of competition in a way, right? Resources are scarce. There's only one of the patatas bravas or whatever, and they both want it.
I guess it's on a case-by-case basis because, yes, some resources are scarce. But sometimes something repeats. So maybe this time I can take you as my +1, mononormativity, anyone. +1 in this case, and then next time I can offer it to you, or we can see who's available, or like it can still be a conversation. I don't have partners who want a cat with me at this point, but who knows, when it happens, it'll be a big issue. I don't know. One other thing I was thinking when I was hearing both of you is that in terms of competition, yes, this has to do with scarcity, I guess, but I think what's also important to acknowledge, when you're monogamous, there isn't that much interaction with the outside world, or not in the same way. Like it's when you're like this closed unit, and when you're open or polyamorous, you suddenly are much more aware of someone's currency on the marketplace, so to speak. So I think it's a really important part, and that's something that me and my first boyfriend ran into actually at the time when we were like doing the monogamy to open thing. He was very conventionally attractive, white, young guy in the gay scene in Amsterdam. So you can imagine that there was a kind of attraction to that image that I wasn't receiving. So now I'm kind of more okay with how I look, and that there is a market for me as well, I know. But at the time that was quite a thing, because it was hard for us to talk about this, with like acknowledging that there is racism in the community, acknowledging that there are like body ideals that some of us are more kind of in line with than others, financial disparities within relationships, disabilities, other kinds of inequalities. And I think competition also kind of has to do with that. So yes, it's sometimes an unmet need, sometimes it's an insecurity, but sometimes it's also just the way society fucking works. And you have to kind of navigate the tensions that come with that, and bring them into the space, and support each other, I guess, in that when one has more privilege than the other.
Yeah, in what way you felt to support Marcus, so to say? What?
I think I was a bit like Eva in the beginning. I mean, I don't easily fall in love, but I wanted to do everything. Like, I wanted to be out all the time. I wanted to try all the things. I wanted to go out to all the parties. I wanted to meet all the people. And so I think in the beginning, I could have been more patient. It's really not my strongest quality. And I think at the time, I could have been better at sitting with the discomfort that arose, because it was all like fun and games for me. But we also, there's a little bit in the book just after that section I read where we talked about kind of like a dating hierarchy, and he was like, well, you're curvy, you're Asian, you're a mom, you have a big booty. It's like you have all of these things that put you like at the top of the food chain. And then he said, like, I'm a fluffy Asian guy. Like, I'm at the bottom of this like
Also
kind of
about
pecking
gender.
order. Also, and he said, you have your pick of like the apps, and I didn't realize it at the time. I think I failed. I was just having so much fun that it was hard to pull myself back and say, actually, this is not really fun on both sides. And it's not usual that I feel that I'm in a position of privilege, but in that situation, I definitely was. And, back then, young Deepa didn't know how to acknowledge, to recognize where I was privileged and acknowledge it, and to try to address the imbalance by just being more patient, really understanding this is not fun for you right now. I think that's something I could have done better in the beginning.
But where's the balance between, on the one hand, thinking it's also something that has to do with something inside of you, and on the other hand, also doing something for someone else?
What do you mean to say?
What Eva just said, that jealousy also can mean that you're insecure about something about yourself. So it's not about what the other person is doing, but it's something that I have to cope with. I have to cope with my own insecurities. So where is the responsibility of the partner?
In my experience, as far as it covers, as far as the book covers, I didn't struggle with jealousy with my husband, but then here's the bonus content for premium subscribers only. Much later on, when I became close to my boyfriend, I was really like kind of hit in the face with my first real experience of jealousy, and it took. I think by then I was already experienced, or as Eva likes to say, well marinated.
What happened that made you experience that at that certain time?
He went out for a date with someone, and I was in a foreign country, so it felt very romantic, like this sexy fling, and I remember. It took me, I think, maybe like 48 hours to get to the bottom of what the insecurity was. But it was actually this feeling that if he fell in love, he could really, leave kind of his life in Amsterdam and move to this exciting city with this person. And I was like, is that going to happen? What's going to happen to me? And then it also was an envy that I wanted to be the one having an adventure in a foreign country with him at the time, but I couldn't because I have commitments at home to honor, to stay at home and be, play my role as wife and mother. And it took quite some time. Like 48 hours felt like the longest 48 hours of my life. But at the same time, like I could make a request from him to give me more reassurance.
Could or you couldn't?
I could, yeah. I think requests are very powerful. They're not demands. Like a person can say no. I realized, oh, hey, I'm actually insecure in this relationship in a way that I'm not insecure in my relationship with my husband, because he's my husband, and there's no divorce in the Philippines, no. And no, but we're in the Netherlands. Okay, fine. we can deregister the gemeente apparently. So I could ask for the reassurance, but a lot of it was actually figuring out my own insecurity and what I could do, while he was in a foreign country, unreachable or having a good time on his own. And so I think it's 50-50. Like you can ask definitely of your partner, but it's also be prepared to hear no, or I can't do that right now. You got to take care of yourself, until we can sit down and talk about this. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I love what you said about requests being powerful, and I think there used to maybe be this kind of culture within like very kind of elevated polyamorous communities that you have to like be very kind of able to handle your own insecurities and feelings, and like you don't burden the other person. I think we've hopefully moved beyond that. I think it's super powerful to indeed request support and reassurance, but of course at the end of the day, and this is maybe like the curious part of today's evening, is like if you want to enter into this space of like dealing with multiple people on a very intimate level, you really gotta, get comfortable with knowing yourself even more, because all of them will kind of mirror you in a way and in a different way. And of course you will run into different things with different people because different personalities, different conflicts. So you have to be prepared to like really, grapple with the things and, look in the mirror a lot.
Yeah, I kind of want to add on this because in the talking groups or community groups, often it's the whole thing of why this word ethical is in front of non-monogamy. Of course, it's because there's a lot of unethical non-monogamy, but I kind of hate it that we have to be, in the talking groups, we have the feeling that we have to be perfect people because we are like having non-traditional relationships, so outside of the norm. We have to be very perfect, and we have to have all these ways of communicating in a good way, and we have to really self-reflect very well so we do not make mistakes and we do not cross boundaries and all these things.
Sounds very religious, doesn't it?
So it is, and I kind of want to a little bit let go, to have like a sloppy, like slordig leven. Also, not to trust our integrity, and to kind of like also let go a little bit of, because all this theory and all this like.
Be a bad feminist, be a bad polyamorous person.
Exactly.
I think it's also that pressure. It's an internal pressure, but it's also this feeling of like, if the relationship gets messed up, it's because it's polyamorous, or it's because you're non-monogamous. That's clearly the problem. So it is this feeling.
Surprise! All divorces started by marrying. Maybe marriage is a problem, right?
I'm gonna steal this. I'm gonna steal this. And so, like, I remember when I had that really kind of very visceral experience of like jealousy, like the sleepless kind of jealousy. I remember feeling, oh my God, like maybe I'm not really polyamorous, or like I'm doing this wrong, or and it's the expectation of perfection is really crippling. But we're here to discuss the mess. So yeah.
And I also had a question for you. If there's an example where you looked in a mirror or learned something about yourself because of a circumstance that happened in your polyamorous or anarchistic love
I am
life.
the only perfect polyamorous person on the planet. No, I mean, like I would say almost every day. Maybe that's not quite true, but it happens a lot because, for instance, during COVID, that's one of the first examples that comes to mind. Like, I think I've been like preaching about like non-hierarchical polyamory for a long time, also for ethical reasons, but also because that's how I want to do it. And then COVID happened, and immediately it was very clear who were the people who were going to be in my COVID bubble. So I was like, okay, so clearly there is some kind of a hierarchy that external circumstances are like dictating. So that's something I had to reckon with, and we kind of all talked about it, and most of them are actually in the room right now. And we had to talk about it because it wasn't as obvious to each one of us as it was to the other, but it kind of crystallized, and at least I had to reckon with the fact that we did make a hierarchy in that regard. So that was something I felt maybe uncomfortable with, but it was the only way to deal with it. And another thing that I think is important to say is that like Eva was saying, like we don't have to be perfect in order to venture into the fray of doing things relationship-wise in a different way, because I still get jealous, I still struggle with like separation anxiety, I still have all of the things. And I think for me it's more about choosing to do the thing I believe in and moving in kind of a courageous direction when it feels difficult, rather than kind of sticking to what society has dictated, because I guess I left what society was dictating for me when I was about 8. That's when I started having queer feelings that I recognized. So yeah, that's years ago. And and yeah, I haven't really been able to look back since, because there isn't a back for me to look back on, really. So for me, it was always like floating around in this kind of ocean and trying to find places where I felt at home, instead of like living on the mainland for a long time and then venturing out to sea. Like for a lot of people, that's how it feels, I guess. But for me, it was always like, oh, I guess I live on the sea, and sometimes there's an island I can kind of latch onto.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe I already want to open up to the floor. It doesn't mean that it's the end of the evening, because we still have a reading. I have also more questions, but maybe there are also questions from the audience. Okay.
Okay, so I learned a term last night, which was ENV, is that right? ENM, ethical non-monogamous, which is different than polyamorous.
It's like synonymous, basically, yeah.
Right, but
Oh, well, no, sorry.
loving many versus
No,
non-monogamy.
sorry, bad polyamorous, bad polyamorous.
Bad girl. But are they? No, but my question is about the E, and that,
Ethical.
ethics sort of revolves around a standard. So, Eva, you brought that up, that you feel like you have to be perfect. But, yeah, where does this ethics land when, say, one person or part of the parties are being, they find it non-ethical. So how do you deal with that?
Thank you.
I think there's a difference between finding it non-ethical and like unpacking your feelings around it. So if that's what you meant, like if it doesn't feel good, it doesn't mean it's not ethical, right? I mean, it can feel very bad like the jealousy that Deepa just described, and then you still choose for that situation. I don't know if this is going. I don't know if I understand your question actually.
But I'm also have a follow-up question, but then I can also get back to you if the question is answered correctly or answered.
Maybe we can
Is
just take a step back, because the reason why there's an ethical in front of the non-monogamy is because there's people who are doing non-monogamy unethically is without consent.
Question.
I think that's the kind of ground foundation of everything, right? Like, I can be non-monogamous, but if I'm hiding it from my husband, that's not ethical. Everyone in the configuration, in the relationship, consents to this form. And when you cheat, you're basically doing it on your own without the consent of your partner. So that's the E. Maybe, yeah.
But still within an ethical non-monogamous construct, people lie to each other, or you don't stick to your agreement, or
Yeah.
So of course we are humans. And I don't like the term ethical non-monogamy. No, I think we should stop using that term.
Yeah. Otherwise, we should also say ethical monogamy, right? Like, I mean.
Yeah, it's
Answer the
stupid. I don't like it.
Sort of. I just want to say that, ethics are defined by the person who says they're ethical. So anyone can say, I'm ethical because I believe this, and this is what the right thing is. And I think that's very fluid, especially in today's world. So that's just a comment.
Thanks. Manoy, do you also know? More questions from the audience.
Hi. Can you talk a bit about your experience of talking about your relationships with your partners, with other partners? Like, is it healthy to say, I do my thing, you do your thing, and we don't talk about it completely? Is it healthy to discuss everything in every little detail, and advantages, disadvantages? Thanks.
Chapter 8, how honest are you with each other? No, everything is a conversation between you and your partner. So you have to figure out where your comfort zone is. How much do you want to hear? How much do you want to know? And that's discussed with every partner. So for example, just to give a really concrete example, between my husband and I, when we started out, we agreed that it would be broad strokes only. So I know where you're going, who you're with, where you're going to be, and what time you're coming home. And if you sleep with if you're going to sleep with a person, please let me know so I know not to wait up for you or expect you. Private sexual matters are always private. So I don't discuss my sex life with my husband, with my boyfriend, and vice versa. We also, especially in the beginning, we agreed on, we had bonus questions like, what do you feel about this new person that you just met? And that was a request based on the need for reassurance. I need to be reassured that, I know the transparency is to reassure me because that's my need. Could you tell me, what do you think about this person? Will you see them again? What do you feel about them? It's a very individual conversation. So find out what you're comfortable hearing. Don't demand to know everything. And and keep sexual matters private, is what I would say.
Yeah, I'm tempted to say like I said earlier, I question everything. So in this case, I would question what is a partner really? In what is your agreement? So if you're in this kind of fluid cloud of having a lot of different connections, then I would operate on a kind of need-to-know basis. But of course, it's something that the people involved need to kind of agree on what they need to know. So for instance, I can imagine if you're living together with someone, that comes with a certain set of responsibilities, or if you're co-parenting or co-petting for that matter. But also if you're fluid bonded or not. So do you use barriers when you're having sex or not? Do you kind of talk about STDs on a regular basis? Is it necessary, or are you kind of all in this kind of cloud of getting tested so regularly that you don't need to like announce every time that you've had sex with someone. You just kind of tell them, oh, my test came up negative. Oh, my test came up not negative. You know, let's deal with this. For me, it's never a given that I feel I need to tell anything to anyone. I just tell people the things that I feel they would like to know, or they need to know for practical reasons, I guess. And I do like hearing about people's dates and like when they have new connections, and especially when they're rambling on about their new lover for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. I really love that as well. You know, so it's all part of it. And of course, it's great if you can like share that with someone, because you know that's also why you're in, like, because you're also friends. Like, I mean, you should be, I guess. So that's how it works for me in any case.
I have a small practical thing then to add to that, is that I really learned that when you come home from a date, that's not the time when you are the most honest. You can be the most transparent, but it's different from honesty. And this is something I had to find out, that transparency and honesty are not the same thing. And for me, honesty is more powerful and helpful in our relationships. It's basically how I digested what happened and how I reflected on it, and then I can, and this needs time to digest. Yeah.
Hello. I have a question which is just for whoever feels inclined to remark on it, and that is to say that, Deepa, like you, I also grew up in a very Catholic household, and you know, with that there came this sort of idea that I was to be a subservient wife, and all of my needs and desires were null and void. I serve this family, and I feel like I came into polyamory when I started to say, actually, I don't want to be a mother. Actually, I don't want this marriage. And it started to have me question the relationships that I was having and how I wanted to structure those relationships. It's really nice to hear that polyamory comes with sexual exploration and desire, but I came from it from a very different space. And while polyamory helped me to step into my sexuality and queerness, I have a question for people that maybe are in the audience in a more curious space, that maybe aren't feeling it from this sexual need to express or experience and desire. What kind of advice you might have for them as they explore coming into a polyamorous journey without this sort of need for sexual exploration?
Thank you. Who likes to answer?
The question was passed to me. I love the question, actually, because it allows me to say that I think if everything's on the table, then sex is an ingredient that you can choose to add or not. So in queer theory, we have this idea of the queer platonic relationship, the QPR, which is actually something that's really important in my life. I have a couple of partners people who I would consider partners who I am not sexually involved with, or that hasn't ever even been on the table, but they are like really, in my most inner circle. And I think maybe part of what the question is addressing is the fact that society values sexual, intertwining on a higher level than non-sexual intertwining for some reason. So you do have to kind of unpack the layers of, is a relationship equally valuable, so to speak, when sex is not part of it? And for me, the answer is a big yes, in capital letters. In a way, maybe my most deep relationships are not sexual even. But that took a while to get there, also with some of the people involved, in the sense that there is this conditioning of, sex is kind of the highest goal, but we call it romance, as I said earlier. So I think having it on the table as something that can be part of a relationship, and of course there's a term called friends with benefits. I also don't understand what the friendship and what is the benefit, because isn't the benefit the friendship, etc., etc. All of that. So there are all these vague terms that we've invented, but at the end of the day, there is emotional connection, there is sexual connection, there are a multitude of connections that we can have with a person. And I just love the approach of being able to meet someone and letting the connection evolve into the thing it wants to be, that works for both of the people involved without society or other people kind of getting a say, really, about what that connection needs to become. So for me, sex is never a requirement, really. It can be nice, though. And also, I think, just to finish that thought, I do think a lot of the theory and the things we've learned in the polyamorous community have actually come as a result of the work of the asexual community, because the asexual community has had to deal with all of these norms on very different levels. And indeed, taking sex off the table as kind of the be-all and end-all of relationships has opened up the space for so many people. So I'm actually very grateful for that. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you. Maybe let's go to another reading. Yeah, let's reading.
I feel like I'm at mass suddenly. Like I'm coming here and anyway. Yeah. Speaking of sex. Chapter 9. Do you still have sex with your husband? After being married for 17 years, Marcus and I know every inch of each other's bodies as intimately as every nook and cranny of our home. Familiarity leaves no unexplored corners and few untested surfaces. Sex on the kitchen counter, dining table, even the bathroom floor, which all felt so naughty the first time, loses its spark after so many years. Sex almost always begins the same handful of ways, in the same times, in the same places. Sometimes it begins on the couch, with the curling smoke of a joint and the throbbing pulse of our favorite tracks from the club. Like most windows in Amsterdam, ours are bare, open to the twinkling of the street lamps, the flashing of a football game from across the canal, curious eyes of neighbors known but unseen. The thought that anyone could see us if they look into the right window at the right moment makes him nervous, but it turns me on. Most of the time, it starts in bed right before we go to sleep. He'll turn to me and touch me where he knows I like it, because he knows I like it, and he knows we don't have a lot of time. He won't have to keep going for too long until I turn to him and part my lips and sigh out loud and kiss his neck and bite his ears because I know that's what he likes. I spread my legs and wriggle out of my sweatpants, wishing he'd started earlier and not left it to the last minute. We need to wake our child up to pee before we go to bed because she still can't sleep through the night without peeing, and I don't want to wake up to a pee-soaked bedsheet for the third time this week because I have so much to do in the morning and it's already so late. And I don't ever know how we're going to have a second baby because I'm the one who can't function on less than 6 hours of sleep because I just need more and he just needs less because he's always fine after the first 4 cups of coffee. He reaches between my legs and I freeze. I think I hear her footsteps, a warning for which I'm always on high alert. Sometimes she climbs into our bed because she's had a bad dream. Sometimes we find her already beneath the covers, right between us before the alarm goes off for school. He jokes about waking me for sex at 5 a.m. before she comes, then he sees my face and gets that it's a terrible idea. Morning sex was my favorite, and I miss it. But then I think, how many years of this tender sleeping face between us do we still have left? I'm ashamed that in my own bed I choose sleep over sex, because in other arms, in other beds, sleep is the last thing on my mind. Why is that?
Thank you. At the beginning of your journey, your polyamorous journey, you had more hookups, I think. Also, people who were kind of fetish, difficult word, fetishizing you, and at the end you're maybe looking more for intimate relationships or connection, deeper connections. How did that shift come about?
I had a wild exploratory phase where I, like I said, I wanted to try everything, and I was curious about, things I didn't know, which was a lot. And at some point, and I don't know if this has happened to other people who have a lot of casual connections, but it started to get really tiring. Like, it was time I was never going to get back. I had to invest like a lot of time to actually, you had an equal chance of having bad, boring, unmemorable dates as, something that could really light your fire. And I also had casual connections that left me feeling very unsafe. And at some point, the realization that we'd agreed to an open marriage with casual connections only to protect the marriage, was not working. And at some point, I remember I had an experience that prompted me to think, if I want to be treated well, then how am I treating the people that I'm meeting? If I wanted to be treated like a human, how am I treating the people that I'm meeting? Am I treating them as disposable and transactional connections as well? And I think what I was looking for was to slow down and actually, like Manoy said, let a connection reveal itself as what it really was. Instead of saying, I want this to be like this, and we're going to go for this at this time, and from this time to this time, and that's what it is. And actually giving it time to unfold, to reveal itself as, it could be an obsession. It could be someone I wanted to have a cat with. It could be an infatuation that became a friendship. Taking the time to do that felt more rewarding for me, and it allowed each connection to actually find its own place in my life. And some of them stayed, and some of them are just never seen again.
It also has to do something with that at the beginning connection were more scary actually than hookups.
Like to have emotional intimacy was scary because it was something that we were trying to protect the relationship, I guess, the marriage, and by saying we don't, we create boundaries around our time and our engagements with connections with people that kind of stop emotional intimacy from growing. Then it felt like, okay, well, it seems like casual hookups are the way to go, but at some point it just felt really unfulfilling, unsafe. And I wanted to be able to kind of lean more into using my feelings to assess, like instead of having feelings off the table, I would actually ask myself, well, what do I feel about this person? What does this person make me feel? And then let that determine the kind of relationship that I would have with them.
Do you also recognize a change in the way you approach love and relationships over the years?
So I think this way that I talk now about having relationships evolve organically, and also the idea of a relationship or a partner not being like a fixed thing anymore, that's something that I didn't necessarily talk about in the same way, I guess, 15 years ago or 20 years ago. I'm starting to reveal my age, right? It's a constantly evolving process because on the one hand, I feel very comfortable in how I perceive the world now. I mean, I don't like what's happening in the world, that's not what I mean, but my worldview is quite clear to me at the moment. But then 10 years from now, I'll probably look back on this moment sitting in the Balie and, the silly things that I'm saying now. Who knows? Who knows where it'll take me? But I feel quite confident that what I believe in terms of, society, how society treats us, how it makes us think, how we can respond to that, how we can resist that, that is kind of starting to work for me. And yeah, it's interesting because I came into like adult life as, I guess, a gay guy, because that's how I sort of was perceived, and I went with it. So hookup culture was a big part of my, sexual awakening and it still is, actually. I still really enjoy that part of, how you can encounter people. But I think for me, something that's always been very interesting is that I always really was present. I think I didn't have to struggle with like dissociating and going back into like myself. And I know that a lot of people do struggle with that, like reconciling their kind of urge and their kind of wanting to connect on a kind of physical level with someone and then going back into themselves. I think for me that was never a separation. So the interesting thing was for me always that when I perceived the other person was doing that, they couldn't reconcile that was what they were doing with how I was kind of there fully. So that kind of caused some interesting conversations on them, because people felt like, oh, you're actually here. You're like actually here and you're with me now, even if it's 5 minutes or 50 or, whatever. So that's always been interesting. So I don't know where that came from. I think I've always just carried that with me, and I hope that that's something I can continue, because I wouldn't want to kind of separate myself from my sexuality in that way.
Interesting. And for you, Eva, because you also became mother, so yeah, how did that influence your love life?
I would say that I don't know yet, because my baby is 5 months, so I have to really see. So I don't know what's going to happen in the future. Actually, I'm open to seeing what form and shapes will be fitting. Yeah.
Well, the audience again. I also have like one. Okay, I'm going to the audience, but I have one big question first. Sorry, about society and what monogamy and polyamory tells you, Manoy, or also later on you, about society.
We need to talk politics. We did.
Yeah.
You touched upon
Everything
politics.
is political.
Like the norm, that monogamy is the norm. What does it tell you about society?
So we are, of course, suffering under capitalism. The world is suffering under capitalism. And capitalism is essentially an invented idea that resources are scarce and only a very few people get to receive them. And I think I wouldn't say monogamy is the same as capitalism, but I would say that monogamy is the relationship form that was really kind of cultivated by capitalism and thrives under capitalism, because when you put two people together and make them only focus on each other, that's the perfect thing to sell things to. The nuclear family, like this is a thing that we came up with about 120 years ago, with like 2.5 child, I think, at the moment. So 2 adults, 2.5 children, and that's the unit that the whole of society is kind of compartmentalized into. So of course, almost no one really wants that. People are told that they want that, but no one really wants that if they're really honest with themselves. But it's very hard to break out of that. And I think we're seeing, of course, the downfall of a lot of things happening in real time. And even a concept like abundance, which used to be used as a kind of antidote to this idea of scarcity and the sort of construct of capitalism.
You're going to talk about the C word people are leaving.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So even the concept of abundance, which I always kind of embraced as something that was very, as a kind of guiding force, I saw it starting to be co-opted by like neoliberal political theorists as a kind of way of like reinvigorating economics, I guess. So I don't know what term to use anymore, but I do think that if we operate from the assumption that actually there is enough for everyone, if we redistribute, I guess I'm a communist in that sense, but sue me. And if we were born on a planet where we aren't told that this is how you should dress and this is how you should do love and how you should do relationships, then actually the world would look very different from what it does now, because I do think that power and wealth are the reasons. A small group of people, it's like less than 1% is hoarding on to like most of the world's resources, and the rest of us have to like scramble. So that, of course, it trickles down into relationships.
Do you think it's that monogamy is a capitalistic thing?
Well, I'm not super political in the way I think and you know and express myself. But when I was speaking about abundance and scarcity, like I think one thing I'm told, or well, a contradictory thing that I'm told is that either I'm greedy or I'm selfish. I'm selfish for wanting to put my desires first and lead with my lead a life from my desires, and I'm also told that I'm greedy for wanting more than one partner in life, or more than I should have. It's not a very articulate comment, but it is really tied up in kind of this idea of either this is the only way you can be, and if you're outside of that, you're greedy. But then, if you want more, if you are kind of focused on yourself and you know leading with your desires, then you're selfish. I don't know what that has to do with capitalism, but it's a criticism that I hear a lot. And to me, what's really appealing about the whole concept of non-monogamy is that we can always create more by having conversations, by working things out with our partners, by expanding our idea of what's possible in relationships. And you know, that's how I guess have been making it work for the last 9 years.
Yeah, and also this idea that poly or non-monogamous people are greedy, it's self-contradictory, because if anything, we're sharing, right?
True. The sharing economy.
Let's go for 2 questions from the audience, and then we can talk to each other at the bar. Oh, okay, there are 3. Uh-oh. There's a short one.
Yeah, when we were talking about the terms ethical non-monogamy, I was just thinking, would consensual non-monogamy be a more fitting term than ethical non-monogamy?
I personally prefer consensual non-monogamy to ethical non-monogamy. I would just prefer to drop both and just say, you know, but yeah, I hear you, that I would prefer that.
Hi. Maybe something to ask you on top of the, you know, anti-capitalist thing. And given, I really love that all 3 of you have very different routes into how you ended up in polyamory. My question to you is, do you consider like colonialism in this, consideration as well? That a lot of our cultures, I think, were polyamorous and non-monogamous until colonialism happened.
Another big C word.
I'm really, there's not a lot of written history of the Philippines before the Spanish came in 1531. We were, for those who don't know, the Philippines was under Spain for 300 years and then under Commonwealth government of the United States for 30 years, which we call 300 years in a convent and 30 years in Hollywood. And it really messed us up. So we inherited kind of Catholic guilt, but also American Puritanism. And there's not, like, I would die, like I would give anything to be able to go back and actually see what existed in, you know, the years before Catholicism was imposed on the Philippines, along with monogamy and you know, religion and religious guilt and all of that stuff. I would like, and personally, at least in my experience, you know, there's just no one unpacking this where I'm from yet, and I really wish it was work someone would start. On the other side of I'm half Indian, and on that side of my heritage, there is, for example, in one of the oldest epics in India, the Mahabharata, a non-monogamous queen, and she had 5 husbands, and they were all royalty. And you know, there's a wonderful novel with a retelling of her story, but it wasn't, you know, it was kind of entrenched or ensconced in this epic, and her relationships with each of her 5 husbands, you know, are written about, like, not denigrating any of them, like they were all equally valid. So and that was before the British came. So I think there's definitely something there, but for me, for the Philippines, that work hasn't even begun yet.
I'm sorry, I'm going for the last question because it's difficult to choose.
What are your experiences with feeling compersion as the opposite to feeling jealous in an open relationship, and how can one develop that ability?
Linear progress, and we're going to tell you how to do it now.
But maybe can you
Step
also...
by step.
What is
Compersion.
Yeah, I think compersion, if I'm going to say it correctly, is the feeling that you feel happy and have happy feelings with your partner doing intimate things with other people. And how to develop that. I had to think a little bit about it before. I think it sounds almost like positive psychology now. It's going to sound horrible. But the idea of granting, dus iemand anders iets gunnen, granting somebody else, the shifting the focus from my feelings to the other person's feelings. Very basic, but that really helped me. And then the humor also that you described also in the book that you have, it's fun. It's actually fun to talk about other people's dates, and it can create an intimacy in itself. It's beautiful when that happens, and it feels so freeing. It's such a perfect antidote to the jealousy, yeah.
In my case, since my husband and I were both from the Philippines, we grew up with a similar messages around shame around our sexuality, our bodies, just having fun in a sexual context. And I was starting to experience what being free of that shame was doing for me, and I was really thriving. So when he started going out on his dates, I realized I wanted that freedom from shame for him as well. And if it was something that he could derive from another context that I didn't own, that I didn't have to control that experience, that he could go have it somewhere, I was like, oh, I really, really want this from him because it feels great for me. And I think he would really, really benefit from it and love it. And I'm just like, okay, go have fun. And that was the beginning of it, I think for me. And it's become more, it's not something, I consciously developed, but it begins with an empathy with the other person for what they can have that I was currently enjoying.
Thank you so much. And so this is the end of this evening here, but it doesn't mean it's the end of the evening because we always have a third round at the bar. And I think there's a lot of experience in the room, so talk to each other and learn from each other's experiences. I want to thank you so much. And the book is there also to sell, to buy. Je mag me alles vragen. And a warm applause for our great panel. Manoy Kant, Eva de Groen, and Deepa Paul.